Hello, it is the beginning of June, so happy Pride Month. Sorry for any background noise, I have my window open behind my camera because it's very hot at the moment. Anyway, because it is Pride Month, I thought I would spend the month reading the books on my TBR that have LGBT plus characters in. Not to say that any other month I wouldn't be reading these kinds of books, but I thought now I'll just get through a bunch that have been on my TBR for a while. So first up I have Trumpet by Jackie Kay. I'm holding it weirdly because it's a book exchange and it has like the area I live in on the sticker, so that's why I'm covering that. So Trumpet is about a jazz musician who passes away, and upon his death the coroner and mortician, when they're doing their job, they realise that he is a trans man, and no one apart from his wife knew that he was trans. I've heard that it's really beautiful, really shows loads of different ways that characters are affected by his death, and certain characters take the trans element better than others. I'm intrigued. As far as I'm aware, it's a cis woman who wrote this, so I'm interested to see how that plays out. Next up I have a book from the library, which the libraries aren't currently open, but I feel like when they reopen I should return all the books I have and just like start fresh. So I need to get through the books I have from the library. I have Pulp by Robin Talley. Don't know a huge amount about this, but I do know that it is about a I think lesbian in the 1950s and then a lesbian nowadays, and I think it's to do with like books and fiction, and there's like a through line that connects those two stories. I really don't know a whole lot about it, but this cover is really cute and I've heard good things, so I'm excited to get to this. And then finally, on my physical books, I have I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This has been on my TBR for ages, so I feel like it's about time I finally got to it. I know that this is, I think, dual POV, one in sort of present day for this book, and then one is like a few years before. But each point of view is told from this perspective of a different sibling, like they're twins I think. One perspective is from the boy, one perspective is from the girl, and I'm pretty sure that the male character is gay. Again, don't really know a lot about the plot, but I've heard that it's really beautiful, and I really loved The Sky Is Everywhere by Jandy Nelson when I read it a few years ago, so I'm really excited to get to this. And then I have a couple of audiobooks, because I love an audiobook. So I have Jack of Hearts and Other Parts by Elsie Rosen. I've heard great things about this. I've heard that it's just really weird and funny. Don't really know a lot about the plot, just know that there's a main character who I think he starts giving people sex advice, but he is a gay main character. So I heard it's really funny. I'm excited to listen to that. And then also listening to Black Enough, which is edited by Ibiza Boy. It's a bunch of short stories about being young and black in America, but I've heard that at least one of the stories features queer characters, so I would be listening to this, reading this anyway, but I will probably check in video wise and let you know what I think of the short stories that involve queer characters specifically. So yes, that is what I plan to read. I'm just going to jump in before we fully get into the reading and do like the most basic history lesson about Pride. I'm not a historian. I literally know the basics of LGBT history. It's something I'm definitely interested in learning more about, and there are tons of resources out there for me to do so I can educate myself, and I intend to. But Pride as we know it, and Pride Month being the month of June, is because that is when the Stonewall riots happened. Stonewall riots were considered, or are now considered, like the first Pride. That's where the saying comes from. If you've heard the saying, the first Pride was a riot, it's because of the Stonewall riots. The Stonewall riots happened in 1969 and were a direct result of the LGBTQ plus community fighting back against police brutality. The police had been like plain clothes going into the Stonewall Inn, which was like a club where a lot of LGBTQ plus people used to meet, and it was a place where they could be themselves, and the police went in and would arrest and assault members of the LGBT plus community. So Stonewall riots were a direct reaction to that police brutality. So bearing that in mind, a lot of people who were sort of front and centre during the Stonewall riots were trans women of colour. And I think it's so important that in this day and age we don't forget that. Pride has sort of become more mainstream. There are, you know, loads of companies and corporate organisations who sell Pride merchandise and get involved only during Pride Month with LGBTQ plus issues. It's somewhat become more, I guess you could say, capitalist, but it's really important that people within the community hold on to the origins of Pride, and people who aren't in the LGBT plus community are aware of these things, and that Pride and everything it stands for doesn't get warped. And it just goes to show that protests can have real effect. Riots can have real effect. The Stonewall riots changed so much. Gradually, of course, throughout history. But as a huge moment in time, those protests, those riots changed so much for LGBTQIA+ people. And it's important that we don't forget that, and that we don't ignore the fact that protests and riots can make real change and have real effect in our society. And I say that now, especially with what is going on with the protests and riots in America, and protests that have also been happening around the world in support of the people who are protesting and rioting in America because of the police brutality of Black people and the murder of individuals like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and so many more Black people who have been killed by police officers and who are systematically oppressed in so many ways. So obviously I am not the person to be talking on Black issues. Of course I will use any platform I have to talk about these issues, but I'm not a voice that should be centered or held to any high regard in this conversation whatsoever. But since I have this platform, however little it may be, I will do my best to amplify Black voices. So down below in the description, I am going to link to websites that have resources, petitions, places you can donate towards the Black Lives Matter movement, bail funds, also UK-based Black organisations who work among Black communities over here, also some charities that specifically work with Black LGBT plus people. I'm also going to link below some amazing videos made recently by some Black booktubers who talk about Black Lives Matter, systematic oppression, white privilege, not just within society, but also specifically within BookTube and Bookstagram. So I will leave all of that linked below. Please go check out all that stuff and help amplify Black voices, sign petitions, donate if you can. There are some great YouTube videos that you can sort of stream to donate. If you don't skip the ads, all the money made from the AdSense is going to be donated to various Black organisations and charities. So however small a platform you have, however much you think you can make a difference, you can. Even if it's tiny things. Everyone can educate themselves. They have resources. Google things if you're not sure where to start. There are so many amazing resources out there, so many amazing Black creators and activists and organisations that we can listen to. So yes, please check out the links below and then further educate yourselves as well, because ignorance is literally no excuse. There is no reason to be ignorant ever, but especially in this day and age. So yes, that is all linked below. Please check it out. And now I will go back to reading.
So I'm really not far in at all. I just haven't been in the mood to read lately. It's literally actually been several days since I started this, and I'm only like 60-ish pages in. The first chapter I thought was really, I think, just beautifully written. The first chapter is from the perspective of Joss, who's the man who's died, his wife, and it's just so sad and talks a lot about grief and loss. Yeah, it's just really beautiful. I'm currently on the chapter, it's switched perspectives to their son, who never knew, so only Joss and his wife knew the truth about Joss being a trans man. And this chapter's just really, I don't like the character of the son. I get that he feels like he was lied to his whole life. I understand his perspective, but he's just so resentful and angry, and so is like misgendering, has like a lot of kind of nasty questions. It's just, yeah, really tough to read. So trigger warnings, I mean, for like the whole book. And also I realised that, yeah, that blurb on the back from The Guardian, obviously from years ago, because this copy's from like the 2000 or something. The blurb on the back does just straight up misgender Joss and refers to it says, trigger warnings for misgendering, that the book is about a jazz trumpeter who pretended to be a man and even had a wife and a foster child who called her dad. That's not cool. So if you do want to read this, and that's going to bother you, I'd say don't pick up this copy. Try and find a different copy, because that blurb irritates me every time I see it. But yeah, that's my update. I'm really going to try and read more. It's not gripping me in the way that I hoped it would. But we'll see. I might get more into it.
So earlier on I was listening to a few stories in Black Enough, and I got to the first one that had an LGBTQ plus character. No sexuality was stated. It was a really short story, and it was written about a girl who has died, and the main character is thinking about this girl who she was only really like acquaintances with in school. They weren't close or anything, but the girl who died, was the first person to ever make the main character question her sexuality. So it's just like a short introspective look on how people think about themselves and how others view them. It was short, but it was nice. I really enjoyed it. One of my favourite stories in the collection so far. So I just finished the second LGBTQ story in Black Enough, which is the one I'd heard about before I started listening to it, because it's gay cowboys. It's great. Need I say more? I finished listening to Black Enough. There was another story which had like a vague mention of a character being queer. It was called Woe, and it was like a really offhand thing. The character was just responding to someone saying that they would like marry a woman and stuff, and he was like, no, if I get married I'm gonna marry a man. But that was cool because it was like not part of the story, like a huge element of it. It was just offhand, which I think is always good to have stories about being queer, but also just queer characters whose stories are nothing to do with being queer, but they just are, because that's life. And then there was one called Kissing Sarah Smart, which was explicitly about being, I think the main character was a lesbian. It was definitely about a female-female relationship, which was really cute. It was great. They had a bit of a discussion about like what constitutes as sex, because they're like messing around and the main character just thinks they're messing around, and the other girl's like, no, we've been having sex. Sex isn't just penis and vagina. So that was cool, I thought. I think that was it for the queer representation. A few stories sprinkled in there, which I thought was really cool to talk about the intersections of race and gender, race and sexuality, because I think so much of queer identity that most people see in like the media is, you know, white people, often just white men, white gay men, or white lesbians. So to have queer black characters was great, and I definitely think we need more of that representation out there. There are definitely books out there that include that, which I think I need to make a point personally of reading more books like that. I've been struggling to read like physical books in general at the moment. I'm just finding it really difficult to focus. So I think what I'm going to do for this afternoon is play some Sims and listen to an audiobook, because I've still got Jack of Hearts and Other Parts, so I'm going to listen to that, play some Sims, maybe go for a walk, and yeah, see how far I can get into that. And then if I feel like reading physically later, I can go back to Trumpet. So that is my plan. Let's see if I stick to it. So I didn't end up playing Sims because my laptop needed to update for like 2 hours, and I didn't end up going for a walk, because it's currently pissing it down. But I did start listening to the audiobook of Jack of Hearts and Other Parts, and I'm really enjoying it so far. The narrator's really fun and adds like a lot of personality to the characters. It's really sex positive so far, which I'm really happy about, and I think is a great thing. Talking about safe sex and sex between men and women and men and men. Yeah, really great so far. Yeah, like 2 hours in. I've got like 6.5 hours left ish. But I'm gonna get right back to it because I'm, yeah, really enjoying it. What a great turn of events. I'm really not feeling well today. So I'm just gonna lie in bed and not do anything whilst I finish the audiobook of Jack of Hearts and Other Parts. I've got like just over an hour left, I think. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really getting swept up in the sort of mystery of who's been sending Jack love letters that then got threatening. But I'm really enjoying it, so I'm going to get back to that. I just finished the audiobook for Jack of Hearts and Other Parts by Elsie Rosen. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. It got a little melodramatic towards the end, but I think that kind of fit with the tone of the book, so it didn't bother me at all. Yeah, it was really great. I think it discussed like a lot of great stuff. It covered a lot of different sexualities. There were conversations about bisexuality and asexuality. A lot of talk about consent and making sex fun and pleasurable. Just generally really enjoyed it. I think it's definitely for mature YA readers. Like, I wouldn't give it to a younger teen. But it discussed a lot of different topics to do with gender and sexuality, and I thought it was really great. A lot of fun. Yeah, just really good. Would recommend. I'd give it like 4 stars, I think. And the audiobook was well narrated, so I would also recommend the audiobook. Yeah. I've come outside to read more Trumpet because it's sunny and nice, but also to get away from distractions like my laptop and Netflix, in the hopes that I'll finish this now. I've got like 70 pages left, so yeah, I just need to finish it at this point. Last night I finished Trumpet. I did it. Towards the end it definitely got quicker to read because the chapters got significantly shorter. Like, most of the chapters in here are fairly short, but could like vary in length, whereas the last like several chapters were like 1 or 2 pages each. So I feel like shorter chapters make me think I'm reading faster, or actually make me read faster. I don't know how that works, but it does. And I also was like, obviously everything was coming to a culmination, but I found myself liking some of the characters more because a couple of the characters, like, spoilers, the son, Coleman, his mindset really changes, and he like recognizes that he might have been like mad at his dad, but like everything that he's doing still has repercussions and would like upset his mum. So he definitely makes like a lot of choices throughout the novel that I'm really mad at, but towards the end he starts like realize the error of his ways, and rethink a lot of the things he's been saying and doing. Yeah, so I didn't necessarily like him by the end, but I definitely empathized with him, and I was like glad of the route that he was taking. Overall, I think I'd give it like a 3-star, maybe 3.5, because the writing's really beautiful. The emotion, like, I definitely got swept up in, like, especially Joss's wife's chapters, because her grief is just like so apparent in the pages. So for the, like, emotional writing, really, I felt like raw, truthful writing, wonderful. Narratively quite slow, like literally not a lot happens in here. There's like a through line of a journalist sort of wanting to exploit Joss's death and the revelation that he was born a woman biologically. We have that running through, which is what the son gets involved in, and then in Millicent, Joss's wife's chapters, we get flashbacks of like when she and Joss met and fell in love and got married and adopted Coleman. So her chapters were definitely my favourite. And then you get sneak peeks into like the funeral director has a chapter, like the person who did the autopsy gets a chapter, some of Joss's bandmates get a chapter, which I thought was interesting, and I really enjoyed some of those perspectives. Overall, because like it seems to take two different perspectives of people who like support Joss no matter what, and then people who view Joss's life as like a lie, who are characters were, I think, in the text clearly not meant to sympathise with. We're not meant to agree with them. But within those chapters, there's like a lot of transphobic language, some slurs around the word transgender, and like a lot of misgendering and stuff. So if that would affect you, I would maybe stay away from this book. But if you can not get past that, but if you can like handle reading that as like a narrative standpoint, and that those characters aren't very nice or they don't understand, then I would definitely say that this is a good book to read. There's like a lot of discussion on gender, some discussion on sexuality, and because Joss and Coleman are both black, there's a few conversations throughout about race as well, which I thought was really interesting. I feel like this is a staple book, which I thought it was really interesting, really lovely writing, would recommend. So now that I've got that done, I'm making it sound like it was a chore. It wasn't. It's just because the writing was so emotional, or I found it very emotional, and like any book that deals with grief is like a lot. And also because like the writing from all the different perspectives, some of them are first person, some of them are third person. I think the journalist, hers switched like almost between first and third person within the same chapters, which was an interesting writing style, but it took me a little bit longer to get through it. as like a literary novel. Literary novels always take me longer. I'm going to switch to a YA. This is what I'm going to try and read today. So I'm currently like 130 pages into this. Really enjoying it so far. The writing, I knew the writing was like quite heavy with like metaphors and symbolism and stuff like that. I'd heard that about it. So went into that knowing it was going to be quite like poetic and flowery and descriptive. But I'm really enjoying that. I think that kind of writing can be a hit or a miss for me sometimes, but this still reads really easy. I think a lot of times with that kind of writing, it's sometimes too much and I struggle like getting into the story, but the characters are really like fleshed out and I really get a sense of their personalities. I think I said before, it's two twins. Obviously two twins, that's what twins are, two siblings. But we get Noah's perspective when he's 13 and Jude's perspective when she's 16. So we know something tragic has happened. I know what the tragic thing is now. Spoilers. This whole thing is going to be spoilers. Their mum dies. So for Jude, that's happened, but for Noah, from his perspective when he's 13, that hasn't happened yet. But for Jude's perspective at 16, that has happened. So it's really interesting in Noah's point of view. At age 13, Jude's really like outgoing and confident and dresses up a lot and flirts with boys, and then Jude at 16 is like wears baggy clothes, doesn't talk to anyone, is really shy, or just really closed off. So there's definitely more to it, which I'm really interested to find out what else goes down, because there's also a prestigious art school that Noah's really excited to attend, and their mum is convincing them both to apply, and we know that from Jude's 16-year-old point of view that she got in and Noah didn't. So I'm interested to see what happened there as well. So really enjoying it so far. Gonna get back into it now. Something bad just happened. Oh, something really, really bad just happened and I hate it. Okay. Last night I finished I'll Give You the Sun by Johnny Nelson. I cried. It was great. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Off the back of reading Trumpet, it was a lot, because this also really deals with grief and loss, and is also written in like a really beautiful, raw, emotive, descriptive way. So it was a lot, but I really enjoyed it. I thought the way that it's narratively told was really clever and really engaging, because we switch between the two perspectives of Noah and Jude, and it's one of those ones that, like, as I was reading like Noah's parts, I was like, I just want to stay in Noah's story, but then his part would end and I'd read Jude and I would be like, no, I love Jude, I want to stay in her perspective. So it was well done in that, like, a lot of times when you read, I find like multiple perspectives, there's always, you know, one I enjoy more or one I dislike more, depending on how many perspectives there are. But this one I really enjoyed both perspectives a lot. And also I thought it was really clever how, like, we obviously know some stuff has gone down because they're like alluded to throughout both perspectives, but as you continue reading, as you get further through the book, even though the two perspectives are set like 2 years apart, you see like the connecting threads start to come together, and you realise like what's happened and how all the characters know each other or are involved even briefly in one another's storylines, which I thought was really clever, really interesting, definitely kept me reading. And then especially towards the end, it's just so emotional and raw, and like you really get this like desperation and passion from the characters, which I loved. So yeah, would highly recommend I'll Give You the Sun. The language is like really flowery and sort of like over the top, and the descriptions are like, in a way, trying to explain this, that what the characters say like is way exaggerated for what happens. So like the mum will say something to like that's sort of a little jab at the dad, but the way that it's described is the kid is like, oh, mum got out a knife and stabbed dad in the gut, but it's said like in a really matter-of-fact way, but that's obviously not what happened. But I found that I actually enjoy that kind of writing. So one more book to go, and then I will have read the little set TBR for Pride reading. So I'm about 70 pages into Pulp now, by Robin Talley. We've got like a dual perspective thing going on again. So we've got Abby in 2017, who for her final year thesis project is doing a research and writing piece about lesbian pulp fiction from the 1950s and 60s. And then we have character Janet from the 1950s who's just discovered a lesbian pulp fiction book. So we've got those parallels going on at the moment. Yeah, I'm only 70 pages in. There's only been like 3 chapters so far. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the narrative voices. I'm interested to see where this is going, because I don't know where this is going yet. But it's making me want to actually find some like 1950s and 60s lesbian pulp fiction and see what that's all about, because I hadn't heard of it before picking up this book, so maybe that's something to look into. I'm finding the bit I'm on really amusing, because Janet is like planning to write a book, like lesbian pulp fiction, and she keeps finding other things to do instead of writing. Like, she's like, I need to tidy up these pages, I need to do my washing, I need to do this instead. Oh, it's too late to write now. And I'm like, relatable. Last night I finished Pulp, so let's do a general wrap up of everything. So to start with, as you saw, I read Trumpet by Jackie Kay. In terms of the LGBT element, this one was about a trans man who dies at the beginning of the book, and upon his death, that's when everyone finds out that he is trans. Only his wife knew before that, So this book kind of deals with the fallout, I guess, or just the reactions of the other characters. This one I gave, I think, like a 3.5. It took me ages to read it, but that was more because, like I've explained before, it's really raw, really impactful emotionally, because it obviously deals with grief and like a lot of tension. So it's a very emotional, evocative kind of novel, but would recommend. Next up, I listened to the audiobook of Black Enough, which isn't explicitly like queer. It's a short story collection, but some of the short stories in that collection are about LGBT characters, and just by like circumstance, I guess, most of the sort of LGBT ones were like among my favorites throughout the collection, and like in general it's a great collection. I'm not always huge on short story collections because I feel like they can be like a really mixed bag sometimes, but all of these I rated at least 3 stars, and yeah, some I really enjoyed. So if you're looking for a short story collection that has like a mix, they're mostly contemporary. There was one that had like a sort of magical realism, historical kind of element to it, which featured I think the main character was gay. Mostly contemporary, but a real mix in sort of tones. A lot of them were fun, a lot of them were more serious, dealing with topics of family, friendship, grief, finding yourself, romantic relationships. A great short story collection. So that's by a variety of authors, but was edited by Ibiza Boy. So I recommend Black Enough. Then I also listened to Jack of Hearts and Other Parts by Elsie Rosen. Really enjoyed this one. Listened to it on audiobook, thought the narrator did a great job. I was like engaged the whole time listening to it. I listened to it really quickly because I was intrigued by like this sort of a mystery element of the main character being blackmailed, but we don't know who's doing it. So that kept me engaged. I really liked the like general LGBT sort of advice that the main character gave, and a lot of like chat around different sexualities, sex positivity, body positivity. Really enjoyed all that. Yeah, I would recommend that. I would recommend the audiobook. It was a lot of fun. I would also probably give Black Enough, I think, like my average rating. I like averaged out what I rated each story, and I think my average rating came to about 3.5 stars. And then I think I gave Jack of Hearts and Other Parts 4 stars? I can't remember now. I think it was around that. Then I read I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I think it's like a 4.5, 4.25. It wasn't quite a 5, but I really enjoyed it. It's just, again, similar to Trumpet, so emotional. Really focused on grief. Really descriptive, flowery writing, which turns out I enjoy. Or I enjoy when Jandy Nelson does it. I rated the last book I read by her 5 stars, and then giving this a high rating. Like, she's clearly my kind of author. And then the ending was just made me cry. Maybe I'll insert a video clip of that. Because that happened. I tried to film myself giving coherent thoughts on the ending, but I was just crying. I also just really love like the physical layout of Jandy Nelson's books. If you can read them physically, I would like recommend that, because on like both the characters in here are like artists, and on Noah's chapters you get like paint streaks on the pages and like ink blots and stuff, which I thought was really cool. And then like the beginning of chapters have scribbles and stuff. And then on Jude's point of view you get like occasional note paper with like quotes written down on them. So just like visually it was really cool to read as well. Highly recommend this. I loved it. And the queer element in this is that Noah is gay, and yeah, has a bit of a romance. But I also really enjoyed Jude's storyline, and then how the characters came together. Oh, it's just great. I loved it. And then last night I finished Pulp by Robin Talley. This is again like dual timeline, one set in 50s, one set in 2017, about a girl who finds out about lesbian pulp fiction. Two girls who in their independent timelines find out about lesbian pulp fiction. Really cool. A lot of the books they mentioned, there's like a little thing at the end that talks about the books that she's mentioned in and which ones are like made up for the book and which ones are actually real. One of them being The Price of Salt, which is Carol by Patricia Highsmith, which most people know because of the movie, which I have read, but I'm intrigued to maybe read some more of like these books that are mentioned in here. This took me a while to get into. It was again one of those books I read like the first half of it over like a week, and then I read the second half all yesterday. The end, when things again start coming together and things start adding up, I think is like way quicker to read, because there's a couple of like red herrings in here, or things that you think are true, and then as you're reading between the points of view you're like, how does that make sense? And then something else happens and you're like, oh, it's this thing. So yeah, I think I preferred Janet's point of view. She's the one who's in the 1950s. It interested me because although I know some stuff about like queer history, I mostly know it from like the 70s or late 60s onwards, but that timeline dealt with like working and being an LGBT person and hiding that, and what happened when like the departments you work for find out you're gay, and how that affects people. And also I really loved like the views we get into like the secret queer communities in the 1950s was really cool. Yeah, I think Abby, who's the 2017 character, she deals with a lot of family stuff, which was sad. But she annoyed me a little bit, because she complained so much about her parents, like, not giving a shit. But then they kept trying to talk to her, and every time they tried to talk to her, she was like, I just ignored him. I just looked at my phone instead of talking to my dad. And I'm like, I get that you've got a lot going on, but I feel like you can't in the same breath complain that your parents don't make enough of it, and then when they're trying to talk to you, be like, I don't want to talk to them. But I don't know. I'm not a teenager anymore. I feel like maybe I was like that as a teenager. Either way, it was enjoyable. There were a lot of excerpts in this of like the books, the other lesbian pulp fiction that the characters read, which there are like 3 separate books that the main character in the 50s reads one, and then she writes a book, and then Abby reads that book, and then Abby writes a book, and at points I forgot which book was whose, but only a couple of times, and then I felt like I got the hang of it. Yes, this was good. I think I'd give it like a 3-star, like a solid 3. Also, something interesting I've noted is that a lot of these have to do with like creativity. So Trumpet, the character of Joss, who died, he's a musician. Then in Jack of Hearts and Other Parts, he like writes an advice column. Then in I'll Give You the Sun, Noah and Jude are both like painters, artists, sculptors. And then in Pulp, they're like all writers. So I thought that was like an interesting thing. I don't know that has to do anything to do with like being queer, other than maybe that, like, you know, writing, art, all that kind of stuff is like seen as an outlet a lot of the time for emotions, and like maybe more lonely people or closed off introverted people express themselves through art when they feel like they can't otherwise express themselves. Maybe I'm getting into this too deeply. But I think that kind of character of like an artist is often portrayed, and maybe that has something to do with LGBT people needing an outlet more so sometimes. Maybe. I don't know what. Maybe it's just me thinking too deeply into things or just talking shit. Anyway, I also wanted to just run down a couple of like trigger warnings, because I know that some people need trigger warnings, and that's perfectly fine. So Trumpet, trigger warning for like general transphobia. Some of the characters speak about Joss in not nice ways. Trigger warning also for death. Jack of Hearts and Other Parts, trigger warnings, as far as I can remember, I think there are a few slurs, but sometimes they're said in the context of like gay characters reclaiming the slurs. So like Jack using I'm not going to say that like the F word that's used as a gay slur. I think he might use that term to refer to himself, but not in a derogatory way, in like a people use this slur, fuck you kind of way. That also has blackmail in it, in case that's, I don't know if that's a trigger for anyone, but it's got like blackmail. I'll Give You the Sun, trigger warning for bullying and death. And then Pulp, trigger warning for mentions of suicide, death, homophobia in the parts especially that are set in the 50s, and then some slurs slash derogatory language slash things that are just not cool nowadays, in terms of wording to do with LGBT people and some racial terms. Yes, there we go. So that was everything I read for my own personal Pride readathon thing. I had intended to get this up like end of June, but I read something so slowly that it's going up in July. But I feel like it's still appropriate because 2 days ago would have been Pride in my city, like our Pride celebrations, parade things that we have, which obviously cancelled this year because of coronavirus. So I feel like it's still fitting, it's still Pride, it's always Pride. Yes, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed my nonsensical ramblings about books. I will hopefully have another video up soon. Thanks for watching.